Hello and welcome to the Creative Cake System. I'm Kerry Griffiths and I worked in association with Katie Sue Designs on this one. So I have a question for all my cake decorating friends out there. You know that time when you put your finger into the cake or you knock it, what's the very first thing we all say, our catchphrase? That's it, stick a butterfly on it. So what did I do? I've designed you a butterfly mold. And I love this butterfly mold. So what I did first of all is we based this on my own designs and I've piped them to give the illusion that they're piped. So we're not looking for a paste one that looks like paste. These are meant to give you something that's unique to work with. And it's a very clever little mold and it does have options. So before I start working on this, let's once again talk about the paste I'm using. It's very important to me that whatever paste you put in here is available wherever you are in the world. So we have chosen to use any sugar paste or fondant that you can buy anywhere on the planet. And we've added either Tylose or CMC powder to that to firm it up to give it a bit of strength. Now the recipe we've come up with is about 500 grams to a pound, roughly that, and we add 10 to 15 grams of CMC or Tylose powder to that. We knead it in and we'll let it sit for about an hour and that will give you a tougher paste. Now there's a little bit of caveat when it goes with that recipe. A lot of it will depend on a few contributing factors. My hands are like radiators. I have hot hands. I'm going to need 15 grams of CMC to 500 grams or pound of paste. If I live in Malaysia, the Philippines, anywhere that's really humid, I'm going to need 15 grams. If I've got cold hands or I live in a country that does not have high humidity, then I'm going to add 10 grams. Also, if I pick up a brand of sugar paste or fondant and it's really soft and sticky, 15 grams. If it's a firm paste to start with, I would then add 10 grams. So there's a little bit give and take. I would say if you're having trouble getting paste out of any mold, not just this mold, but any mold, you find it's not releasing properly, look at two things. Have you dusted the mold? Is it completely dry? And if your paste is sticking and you have dusted it, then maybe you need to add a little more CMC or Tylose to it, just to give it a bit more firmness to capture all of the detail. So let's have a little look at the mold here. What I've done is I've given you 3 different butterflies on one mold. Put that on camera for you. 3 different butterfly wings paired, and I've actually put a body in the middle. Now I know a lot of you out there would like to model your own body, but I did feel that if I give you the option, you can then choose to use it or not. So this is the mold we're going to be working with. So let me just grab some stuff and we'll start working. So first things first, we need to prepare our mold. As you've heard me say lots of times if you watch my other videos, we use cornstarch or corn flour. I'm using a soft brush. I tend to use that instead of a pouch where I dab it on there because I want to make sure that the cornstarch or the corn flour's really gone into all of the little nooks and crannies in this mold. Now here in Katie Sue, they always say to me, Kerry, you're using a lot of cornstarch in your molds. I do that on purpose. I've got really hot and sticky hands. I want to make sure that any moisture that's in this mold has been dried out. Take it over, give it a good old tap out, make sure that all of that's out of there. So now we'll have a really silky film of cornstarch or corn flour between my paste and the mold. So I have my paste my mold prepared. Now, why didn't I use icing sugar? If I put icing sugar into this mold to dust it and there was any particles of moisture in it, that moisture would suck up the icing sugar and it would become a syrup, therefore it would stick more. So let's go to work on this. So I've got this here, I've got my paste here, I'm going to take a little bit of it. Now a lot of this will be familiar to some of you, so I'll do the top butterfly to start with. Take my piece of paste, I roll it into a sort of sausage shape because I'm going to start here and work my way down. So I'm just pressing this bit of cornstarch on my fingers with a slight rocking action, and the rocking action means that the paste will work its way down into the mold. Now I spend a lot of time piping and getting detail into these, and thank goodness Katie Sue has been able to capture all of it. Now I'm working my way down and you can see ahead of me I'm pushing almost this little tsunami, this little tidal wave of paste, because when it comes to the end I only need to clean that one little bit off. So working my way down, all the way to the end. And when it gets to here, I can use my thumb and I could just swipe that off the edge. I could have used something like a plastic knife, and I could have done that with a plastic knife and taken the edge off. Although sometimes with the shallower molds, if you press too much, you'll dig a piece out of it. You need to avoid that. Also, never use a real knife, only ever something that's plastic, because you don't want to damage the mold after you paid good money for it. So work your way through the mold. This bit here is this hollow here. So make sure you haven't filled that in thinking that's part of a butterfly wing. So work your way around. Now I've still got a little bit of excess here, so actually I can show you cleaning off with the knife here. So if I rest my blade on the edges of my mold, I can take that excess off and pull that out. So once I've got all of the edges nice and clean, you've heard me say it before, I open it a bit like a book. I want to do this so I can actually see that there's no fringing of paste over the edges. Now, because of the flexible nature of these molds, I can just let gravity help me pull it out, and that will give me my butterfly wing. But this mold has a secret. Let me do this one again, and I'll show you another little trick. Now, let's just clean that off. I'll do this butterfly this time for you. So this is the one that's got the most detail on it, so you need to make sure that you're quite pedantic about getting the paste put in the right place. So again, knock it out. I usually start at the point and end here. Again, cornstarch on my fingers. Excuse my rocking table. I feel like I'm working at sea again. Working my way right down the mold, trying to keep that tidal wave of paste ahead of me. You will have noted, by the way, I didn't put a rolling pin over the back of it. I could have done, I just choose not to at this point. I think everyone has their own working preference. So again, I've taken that to the end. I can just use my thumb to swipe off the last bits. Come on back in and make sure all of these edges are nice and clean. Now, if there's anything that's a fault with this mold, it's actually keeping the paste in it in the first place. It really wants to release your paste. If you've got sticky fingers, make sure you have cornstarch on them, just so that you won't pull the paste back out of the mold. It does like to release quite quickly, and that's an added advantage when it comes to working with thin pieces of paste. So there you go. So I've now got my paste there. Now you'll note there's this groove down the middle of this mold. The reason the groove is there, it's meant to be folded. So if I don't want a wing with just a plain back, if I fold it over and match the edges up and give it one good press, voila, I now have a double-sided wing impression. So if I have a little bit of a close look, you'll see there's detail on both sides. Now when I open it up as a book, try not to hold the back of the wing because you don't want to squash all that detail you've just put in. Again, turn it over, let gravity help you. With this one, sometimes it needs a little bit of encouragement to lift out. You can see the detail there, and there's detail on the back. The detail on the back will never be as good as the detail on the front, and that's because as you're creating the front side, you're pushing the paste down into the mold. When you're creating the back side, you don't have that luxury. You can only just impress a pattern. But if you've got a butterfly that's going to be viewed from 360, that gives you some detail into the back of the wing, which is really important to you. So that's the wing. Now let's talk about the body. Now there is another wing here, so let me just talk about this one while I've got it in front of me. Now if I look at this mold, I've got 1 butterfly, 2 butterfly, 3 butterfly. As you're looking at the mold, if this is the butterfly's body, this is the right way up, this is the right way up. But because of the positioning of the wings on the mold, if you turn it round, this would be the right way up. So if this is the butterfly's body, this is how the wing should sit on the butterfly's body. You'll see examples of these later on, but I know that when you look at it, this looks a bit confusing. But to me, looking at those like that, that really looks like a really cute little fairy wing there. So that's another thing you can get out of this mold. So we're looking at the body here. Again, I'm going to go in and put a little bit of cornstarch in there. As I said, a lot of you will just naturally make your own body for your butterflies, but I do feel it's important if I'm designing a mold, I want you to have all of the elements. So I'm going to roll myself a little sausage paste. Now I'm working with green paste in this mold because I actually wanted to make sure there was good contrast so you saw every single detail of the mold. However, when we work with wings that have been slightly dried, I'm going to be working with pink because I want to show you some dusting techniques. So I'm going to work my way from the top. Now here you really do need dry fingers because this is such a shallow piece. As you can see, it will come out. I do know some decorators will go in and use the end of a paintbrush or modeling tool to push it in. I tend to just rely on my fingers. Again, I've worked down to the end. Now, if I was to swipe this, the whole thing would come out. So I tend to put my finger on there, and then I swipe off the end, and then I work along, just make sure that the body is all in there. Now, when it comes to creating the body, if I was to take this out now, it would be relatively flat. However, what I want to do is I want it slightly rounded. So I won't fold this entirely, but I will give it a bit of a squeeze. And what that does, when it comes out, there you go, when it comes out, it gives me more dimension to the body. You can see it's slightly rounded, so from the top, I don't really have square edges. So I'm going to sit him to one side in a minute, because I want to show you the next step with him. So that gives me my butterfly body. And this gives me the butterfly wing. Now, if I'm making wings, I usually make them an hour or two ahead of time. As soon as I get to this stage, I lie it on a bit of foam or a bit of kitchen paper just to dry out. For my American friends, that's kitchen towel. So just make sure it dries out. It doesn't take long for this thickness of paste to actually firm up. I have tried this with gum or petal paste. It's a little trickier, but yes, you can do it. I have found, however, with this adjusted paste that we use, it works and dries perfectly as well. So experiment, find out what works for you best. So let's show you the next stage with the body. So here we have the body. Nice little piece of paste. Now, something I would say about this is, at this point you need to make a decision. Is your butterfly going to be fully edible, or is it going to be something that you have to tell the client to take off the cake before you eat? If you want it to be a fully edible butterfly, this is all you need to do with the body. However, I like to take it one step further with some realism. So what I do is I've taken a flower stamen, and I've dipped the ends of it in PVA glue, and then I've dipped those ends again into some green craft glitter, because in this country, in Britain, we have to warn our client if there's anything inedible on the cake. It's a good working practice. I'm going to tell the client that the butterflies are inedible. That way I'm covered. To be honest, they probably take them off anyway and keep them as keepsakes. So I've got my stamen with a little glitter on the end. You can buy florist stamens at most craft places. I'm going to snip off the ends. So that gives me two little stamens like this. Now, depends on how adept you are. You can either pick them up with tweezers or you can pick them up with your fingers, and I need to dip them in some edible glue. Now, edible glue is just either pre-bought, or you can make your own with some warm water and you add in some CMC or Tylos, just a little bit, and let it sit. So I'm then going to insert these into the head of my butterfly. Now, if I'm 6'1" and I've got big hands and I can do this, you can do this. So there you go. Once you've got the stamens in, play around with the antennae just so that they're pretty much where they are. You can see that adds a whole nother delicate nature to this butterfly body. So once I've got the butterfly body done, I'll just sit him to one side just to make sure he's there for when I need him later. So let's take a look at those wings we've been drying and talk about how I'm going to get some interest or dust into them. So now the magic's going to happen. Now these have been done this morning, about 2 hours ago, and as you can see, they're firm to touch. You can pick them up and handle them. They'd only break if you play around with them. If you've made butterfly wings in advance, you could easily store these in a damp-free, dust-free box and use them for the future. So of course, the older they are, the firmer they will get. So I would say if you're going to make butterfly wings, sit down and make a load of them. So I've got the 3 different designs here. I did want to talk about this one just so that there was no confusion about it, because on the mold, it looks like this. However, if I'm making a butterfly out of it, if I turn this around, this is how it would be with the butterfly, and then the body would go down the middle like that. Okay, just so I'm clear on that one, because I don't want any emails coming through I've confused you. So let's put that one by. Now, I would say when it comes to doing butterfly wings, delicate is the best way to go. I've also found that if I make white wings and dust them, I don't get the same impact as I do if I've done coloured ones. So I've made really pastel pale pink butterfly wings here, and I'm using a pink luster dust. I will hold it down and then I will work that luster dust into the wing. Now, as you can see, immediately it starts to bring the detail out. Now this is just exactly the same edible dust that you would use on your cakes or your flowers. Remember, you're working with a food source, so you want to make sure that everything you utilize or use is food safe and can be used. So work my way around. Now, these wings that I've done here are one-sided in that I didn't put the embossing on the other side, so if I flip that over, you can see the back is plain. I will always double check when I'm dusting just to clean up the back, because you'll find as you're actually dusting, I don't know whether it's done it on this one, you'll end up with little patches of colour anyway. I'm not worried about the back of these wings just for this demonstration. So I've done those are all nice and shiny. Let's move those to one side and bring the next set in, just because I want to show you different options for dusting. Again, going in, giving it a bit of a luster. Now, if you're someone who owns an airbrush, don't forget you can airbrush these. But what's going to happen when you airbrush them is the airbrush will catch all of the detail, but then it will give you areas that maybe don't airbrush as well. So just be cautious of that. So that's one of those wings done. Bring in another one. Now you can become very, very conveyor belt when you do this sort of stuff. If you've got lots of butterflies to do for a cake, cut them all out, then put all the luster dusts on them, and then go in and do more finer detail all the way through. Again, always make sure you turn them over, because you'll see that on the back you've got little patches of them. There's 2 reasons why I clean the back off. We're going to tell you how to keep all the dust on these wings, and if we concentrate on keeping the dust on the front, what happens about the back? If there's any loose dust on the back, it could drop off onto your cake, and you don't want that. So let's put those to one side and bring these in again. Now, I've used my luster dust. I'm going to put that to one side, and now I'm going to come in with a clean brush, and on this one I've actually used a really deep pink colour. I'm going to wipe most of the excess off onto my kitchen towel, and then I'm going to do a small circular motion just on the very, very tips of the wings. And what this will do, because we'll compare it to an undusted one in a minute, it will just give another dimension. We're looking for eye-catching butterflies that are quite quick to do. I don't want to spend hours creating a butterfly. I want to be quite commercial and get it done. So if we look at the 2 of them side by side, you can see, wow, just that amount of detail is enough. So let me just do the other, so we do have a pair. So once that's done, I'll then go back to my luster dust just to tidy it up a bit, just clean off any excess. If you find they get too pale, you can always go in and add more. If, however, you've gone too dark, you can always use a bit of the pale one to take the colour down, or you could put some just cornstarch or corn flour on your brush just to blend it all in. So let's leave those to one side and bring the next ones back in. Now this is another option for the same technique. This time, instead of doing the edges, if I do this section, which is next to the body, then you'll have a wing that's shaded outwards. This works particularly well if you've got a body that's coloured the same darker colour. So give a little bit more dimension in there and there. And as you'll have a build-up of dust in there, just go in and remove the excess with the dry brush. You could use something that puffs out air. Like I do a lot of photography, so for me, people call this my posh puffer. It's something that was meant to clean the lens of a camera. I use that because obviously it's not very good food practice blowing on food. You could use just a small dry squeezy bottle just to puff air out. So we're going to come back to these wings in a little while, just when I show you how to assemble. So here are our dusted butterflies, but before we get to assemble them or build a form or anything, there's a couple of options I want to talk to you about. Now, at this stage, the dust is on the paste, but it is also loose dust. It would be very difficult to steam these because with this thickness of wing, the steaming process might soften them. So what I do is I actually use an edible spray glaze, and I would just give them a really light spray. I would take it somewhere, spray it from about 8 or 9 inches above, just so a layer of the glaze settles onto the butterfly wings to seal them. There is another option as well. At this point, I could go in, and if I'd choose to, I could actually get some gold or silver or black dust colour. I could mix it with maybe lemon extract or maybe an alcohol, and then I could paint the edges. So if you look at a finished butterfly here, you'll see I've gone in and just using the side of a brush, I've caught the detail on the butterfly, and then I've glazed it with the spray glaze just to seal all of that dust in. If you have done a lot of dusting, make sure the backs of the butterflies are clean. They could also do with a thin spray of glaze if you're scared it's going to come off onto anything. So that's just that process. So let's put my butterfly wings to one side and talk about making something to dry my butterflies on. Now, a lot of the time you'll put them on styrofoam and you'll try and put pins in to support them, but I make what I call an M support, M as in mother. This is just a bit of craft card. It could be the edge off an old cake box. It doesn't matter what it is. First thing I do is I fold it in half, so I have a nice seam down the middle, and that gives me that. And then where this edge is, I'm going to fold these edges back to it. So fold that side, turn it over, fold this side back. Now, this gives me my M support. Now the reason I like doing this is because if I use something like a piece of styrofoam that's got a 90-degree angle to it, my butterfly is going to have those wings, therefore it's going to look quite closed. But if I stretch this out a bit, I can dry my butterfly so it's got a bit more of an open wing. It can actually show me more of the detail on the wing, which is what I want in my butterfly. So that's part one of the former. The next piece, I'm going to take a bit of cellophane. Now, you might not be able to see this on screen, but it's just cellophane. Could be a bit of plastic, could be wax paper, it could be anything that will release. I'm going to take this, I'm going to give it a little bit of a fold down the middle. Not too much of a fold, it's just a hint of a crease. So I'm going to put that on my work surface and bring in the elements that I actually want to use. So let's use this butterfly because I like that one. So here are my two wings. I tend to line everything up so I know exactly where it is I'm working. We already have the body I used, so that's also ready to go. Now, what are we going to stick it together with? You can use edible glue, not a problem. I would say if you're using edible glue, make sure it's a thicker edible glue because this could soften back if you're using just normal edible glue. I tend to like to use raw icing. Obviously I pipe a lot, so I've always got raw icing on the go. If I'm raw icing, I could put a little smear of white vegetable fat here to release, but to be honest with you, it's such a small dot of raw icing, it's hardly going to stick. So I'm going to take my bag, I'm just going to snip the end off, just so I have a little bit of raw icing on the end. The first thing I do is I put a little bulb of raw icing right in the middle. This is part of the process of getting these wings to line up with each other. So slide them together until they butt together. Now, that is the only raw icing that's going to be making contact with the cellophane, which is why I'm not worried about putting white vegetable fat on. It's highly unlikely it's going to stick to it. You'll also note I'm not building it in the former, because I know that as soon as I put it in the former, I've condensed everything. I want to be able to reshape it once it's done. I'm then going to come in with a bit of raw icing again, put a bulb of it in the middle. That's all I need to do. Lift up my butterfly body. A lot of the time you'll see I pick it up by its antennae, because this butterfly body is pretty much dried by now. I position it into my wings. I'm not going to fuss with it too much at the moment, because the next stage is I'm going to lift it into my former. So I'm going to slide that down, slide my former back in, then I'm going to come in, carefully lift up the whole butterfly. Doesn't matter if it distorts slightly. That's my next job. So here I am, I can come in, I use the tip of my paintbrush just to move it into position, move things around, let them settle. If you can see any of the raw icing, use a brush just to tidy it up a bit. Now I've chosen to use a contrasting colour here. I've got green onto pink. I could, once this is dried, I could go in and paint this. I could make it any colour I want. So as you saw with this one here, I actually painted the edges with green, and then I painted the body with actually a green luster dust. So it depends on what design you wish to do. Once I've done that, I take this whole thing immediately and set it to one side and don't touch it again. If you touch it again, you're likely to weaken it. Within about an hour, it's dry enough that I can just slide the cellophane off and pick it up. Remember, these are fragile butterflies. They will hold their own, but they won't hold if you keep playing around with them. If you are very conscious that this needs to travel, then after you've done that, you could possibly put a small band of sugar paste on the underside just to give it extra support. But to be honest, I haven't broken one yet, other than dropping it or dropping a paintbrush onto it, which I can be a bit clumsy at times. I can do that thing. So that's the finished butterfly. Let's move that to one side. Now, you've already seen my green butterfly. It's probably one of my favourite butterflies. I'm going to show you some examples, and then I'm going to get the cameraman to show you them in situ on a cake. So again, the same design. Obviously, I like this one a lot. I've done this with, it's a hydrangea and a hyacinth colour, and I've edged it with gold. I then went for the bronze tones. Now you can see here, the whole thing was done with like a deep cream, and then I used that motion and I put some gold colour on the top of the bottom. Again, once it was in position, I painted the middle gold. As I did with the demonstration, I reversed it. So this time I did the bronze in colour on the inside, and you can see it gives another dimension, another shade to the butterfly. This is the butterfly I've been explaining to you about how the wings settle. Again, I edged this one with bronze and actually put the darker pink in the middle. And as you can see on this one, I actually made some stamens with pink on them. Again, I went in, this one I did pink, a very delicate one shaded with silver. And then I thought, right, let's add a little drama to the mix. And with this one, I went straight in and I did it all with black. I would say if you're using black, be very careful. Black likes to travel. You really do need to make sure that once you've done this, you glaze it, because there's nothing like getting a black fingerprint onto a cake. And there's only so many butterflies you can put over your mistakes. So hopefully you've enjoyed that tutorial. I'm going to take a closer look at them in situ on a cake now, and I'll see you in the next time round. Bye-bye.